Good morning, Judith.
Good morning, Sonya.
Welcome to the Coach's Cup podcast. I am Sonya Green from SonyaGreenCoaching.com.
And I am Judith Fender. I'm one of the amazing coaches with the No BS weight loss program.
All right. And today we have another one of those fantastic titles, Dead People's Goals. So Judith, I'm going to let you explain our title for today. You're the inspiration for Dead People's Goals.
So in case y'all don't know, maybe I haven't mentioned it, maybe I have. I do like to spend a lot of time in the YouTube channels, listening to podcasts, catching personal self-development through YouTube. There's so much out there. And I first came across Susan David, her TEDx talk on, she doesn't call it Dead People's Goals. She calls it,
I think she calls it emotional agility.
And which is exactly the name of her book. And, but in this TEDx talk, she's going on. And then she was like, oh, so you have dead people's goals. And that just really resonated with me. And in fact, I've used it a couple of times on my private clients to help them see when they are denying their human feelings, bottling them up or ignoring them, whatever they're doing. I don't want to feel this way, but how do I get out of this, Judith? And and I'm like, oh, so you have dead people's goals. You don't want to feel your feelings.
Yeah, because as long as we are alive, we are going to have feelings.
Right. 24/7.
And as a culture, we have decided that there are good feelings and there are bad feelings.
Either or.
Yeah, we have, this is the whole concept of having a binary. You have, one side that's black and one side that's white, one side that's good, one side that's bad. It is a concept that's been around forever. Right. We have the sheep, we have the goats. Mm-hmm. So most things in life are the complexity of life when mm-hmm. we reduce it to a binary of this or that. Mm-hmm. The complexity, the robustness of life is kind of sucked out of it to be real. So when we start talking about good emotions and bad emotions and throwing a label on them, we've really done ourselves a disservice, I think.
How so? I was like, how so? So if we are throwing a label, good or bad, mm-hmm. we're denying ourselves the opportunity to feel growth, to grow yes. through the feeling. And it's that, here's her word, rigidity. Yeah. That being rigid thinking, rigid feeling, and it's the stuckness.
Yeah.
If you're rigid, we're processing live time here, folks.
Yeah. Well, and we've talked about this. I don't remember when we talked about this, but I know we've talked about it before because I love the Lao Tzu quote that talks about how it's basically boiled down in a nutshell, says that living things are flexible and supple. Mm-hmm. Dying or dead things are rigid. Mm-hmm. So when we get into what Susan David calls forced positivity or mm-hmm. false positivity, that makes us rigid. And that, like I said, it takes all the complexity, all the robustness, all the life out of it. And that's why, dead people want to just feel, well, dead people, well, I don't know what dead people want to feel, but they don't feel anything.
Rigor mortis, right?
Yeah.
Rigid.
Yeah.
Hello, like the inflexibility of a dead person. Yeah. Of those goals. Like there are none if you are rigid.
And I can only put my Southern female perception on this. So I'm going to generalize here, folks, and I apologize if this is not your your experience, this is my experience, is that this sense of false positivity has been pushed on me my whole life.
Right.
And I think, especially being a Southern female.
Girl. So, yeah. So that concept of, we've talked about this before, I'll give you something to cry about.
Yes.
Right. Go to your room and don't come out until, you go to your room and go be angry, but don't come to me
out
crying.
with a smile on your face.
Right. And I heard her talk about this, which it actually resonated with me, this definition of emotional gaslighting. Like, we're gaslighting ourselves if we are in that context of seeing things as either or, good or bad.
Yes.
That we are denying, like, oh, I'm not supposed to feel bad.
Right. It
But
becomes
really
a moral issue.
I feel so shitty, but I shouldn't feel this way.
Yeah. So we make it this moral issue.
Mm-hmm.
Why do I feel so disappointed? Why do I feel so sad? Well, guess what, girl? It's because you're human.
Well, and because you're thinking.
Yes. Yes. Again, dead people don't think.
Right. Either. Hello. Sorry, am I screaming?
Yeah. So, I mean, if I had to put it in a nutshell, one of the worst things we've done is say there are good emotions and there are bad emotions.
Mm-hmm.
There are just emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And we're meant to feel all of them.
100%. And our ability to define them, like we talked about stress, which I love this so much, where Susan talks about, she calls it the stress bucket. It's like this huge bucket of feelings in there. And we just put all the feelings in the bucket and we call it stress and we stir it around. Mm-hmm. And she's like, our ability to look at our feelings, and if we look what's below the stress and to go one level lower, get granular, and our ability to identify the feelings beneath will help us process through and create this, moving into gentle acceptance of feelings.
Well, and you think about it, if it's bad, and stress is bad, right? We know stress is bad.
It feels bad.
It does. It feels bad.
Confirm.
So what we do with it, instead of getting granular, instead of digging down and identifying it, we just say, oh, bad, shouldn't be dealing with it, push it away. Mm-hmm. And we just, so we get vague, we label it as stress, rather than labeling it, oh, this is disappointment, or this is fear, or whatever,
overwhelm.
Yeah. And I mean, overwhelm, I think, is kind of like stress. It's one of those catch-all. When we do that, again, we just push it away, get it to arm's length, and think that we're labeling it. So I'm going to get it away from me. And we feel like we can somehow outrun it if we don't, if we're just put this vague negative label and try to push it away. But what happens when we resist?
Right. That bottling up, that, I have two trains of thoughts going on right now. I have this battery. For those of you guys not watching us on YouTube, I have batteries around here for my microphones and things. And if you think about a battery, it has a positive and a negative. It needs both to be a battery.
Yes.
And that's much like our feelings. We need both to be human, to allow ourselves to be a human. And then Susan talks about this, she uses the rain analogy, which is raining here today. So I'm going to walk outside and be like, oh, it's raining. And that kind of gentle acceptance of knowing, like if you walk out, a gentle acceptance would sound like, oh, it's raining. Oh, I'm angry. Where she talks about, if bottling it up would be like walking outside and ignoring that it's raining. I don't see rain. It's not raining. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't see rain. And
we would think you were crazy if you did that, right?
You know, how many people have we seen like that? They're ignoring their feelings. They're in such denial of the existence of the negative. Then they just bottle it up. I'll deal with that later.
Yeah. Well, and so the first thing when I turned on the news this morning, when I turned on the TV this morning, the first thing that came up is there's been a mass shooting in Nashville.
No way.
And at this point, there's no casualties. There's like, I think 4 people were shot, but we're seeing a lot of these right now. And people are wondering, what's going on? Is it something post-COVID? Is what's triggering, pun intended there, these shootings? And I think a lot of it is because that's generalizing again, but people are not dealing with their feelings.
As someone who practices thought work and tries to work a lot on feelings and coaches people on their feelings, and knowing who I was before this and how much work I had done to get to 49 years of age, in one piece, I can see where, how, being on autopilot can happen.
Yeah.
We're culturalized through media, through, whatever avenues culturally, how our family, how our parents did it. Oh my gosh, I was watching an episode of My 600-Pound Life. And, to be that kind of observer into culturally how, 600 pounds does not happen in a vacuum. Like the enablers is in particular one girl, I can't remember her name. I've just lost my train of thought where I was going with this, where you have to look outside and begin to question.
Yeah. Well, even talking about, even using that analogy of bottling up your feelings, when you bottle something, you put it under pressure. When you push down those negative emotions and ignore them and say it's not raining outside when it's clearly raining, when you say I am not angry when you are clearly angry, then that is, we can't live that way. It's going to smack us in the face.
It's right. You're going to have your
you've got to release the pressure at some point.
Yeah.
And if you don't, it will be released. It will be, because we're not getting back to the idea of living in integrity. You will have illnesses. How many autoimmune diseases do we have today? And I have to wonder, how many of those are the results of somebody bottling up their emotions, pushing down their emotions. Weight. People eat through their emotions.
100%
shop through their emotions. Anything to keep from having and I'm using air quotes here, negative emotion. What if it was just an emotion? What if anger was just an emotion that we acknowledged, like you said, we dealt with? Because folks, here's the magic. When you acknowledge a negative emotion, when you say, I feel it in my body, this is where it is, this is how it feels, guess what? It dissipates.
Yep.
You take the heat off of it. That's all there is to it. It's really kind of disappointing, actually. Isn't it?
Oh, do tell, Sonya.
I mean,
well, yeah.
You expect it to be this like magical thing, and it just kind of fizzles.
Yeah.
And we spend our lives afraid of these negative emotions. We bottle them up. Yeah. And then we're left to deal with the consequences.
Right. And her other way of phrasing it was, she calls it brooding, which I think we might call it, in OBS, like the shitty diaper, that idea of thinking that, well, it would just be the negative, it's always raining. Oh, well, it's always raining. Just that or
What should I expect? This is the way it always
Yeah,
goes.
woe is
Nobody
me, I'm
ever pays attention to my needs.
Nobody hears me. Nobody
Mm-mm.
asks me.
Here I am. I've got all the answers, but nobody's going to ask me.
Yeah.
I mean, I hear that, some form of that, a lot in new clients. And then we spend 12 weeks working on that, so that by the end they're saying things like, well, my brain said today that, but I knew, right. Because they've learned to separate our brains from
the story.
Yeah.
Right. You have thoughts, emotions, and a story. The brain tells stories.
That's right.
And it gets on autopilot, because what does the brain love to be? Efficient.
Yes.
It's easy. It's easy, comfort, ease, and pain-free.
So, I mean, we're not saying that you can go from having dead people's goals of not wanting to feel to suddenly feeling all the things. You know, it takes some work. How do you get there?
Well, then that's the gentle acceptance, Susan David would call it, but more metaphorically, is that what I think of a pressure cooker, teaching people the concept of dealing with the emotion as it comes along, releasing some pressure off of your mama's pressure cooker, your grandmama's pressure cooker, canning some green beans. Like, we all know that sound. Psh, 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 psh. Right. So thinking of yourself, how can I release some pressure? I notice I'm feeling pressure. Well, it's because I'm thinking, this thought, and I'm feeling pressure on myself. How can I release some pressure?
Yeah.
Feel the feeling. Pressure feels like this in my body. Naming it. Of course, just naming. I notice I'm feeling.
Yes. And that's another thing I love that she says. We say, I'm mad.
Or I am mad. You are not mad. You're not embodiment of mad.
Right. You are Judith. But you can say, I notice I'm feeling angry. I notice I'm feeling sad.
Create some of that separation,
ahead.
Creating some separation from yourself and the feeling.
Yeah. So the first thing is to acknowledge that. And then the second thing is to make sure you're digging down and getting granular and trying to tease out, what is this thing I'm feeling? Because it's not always easy. We haven't had practice. So we're not going to recognize immediately an emotion like fear, or an emotion like disappointment, frustration, maybe,
I coach people sometimes. I've had clients where we started out with just, is it positive or negative? Does it feel like you want to move towards it or away from it?
Right, because that's the way we're culturized to put them in binaries. And that's, again, once you can move past that. But you have to start where you are.
Right. Exactly. I mean, clearly you, especially, working with a coach, that's our area of expertise, is helping you identify where you're at, because we talk to brains all day long. We do this work. We have an understanding. We're outside perspective, helping you figure out your emotional map for yourself, where you're at in the day-to-day living. If you're living dead people's goals, or if you're emotionally flexible, agile.
Right. So that is the goal. That is the fountain of youth, so to speak, is to get comfortable with emotions just being emotions. And then you're flexible. And then you can wake up one morning and say, it's raining and I'm disappointed. And that's okay. It's not a moral issue. It's not good or bad. I don't feel like smiling today. Okay. That's not a moral issue. We have days where we don't feel like smiling, and that's okay. We also have days where we don't feel like smiling and we still have to face the world and function in the world.
Right. And that's where we would, knowing, allowing ourselves to have some space for the emotion, but we don't let it drive the bus. That's how we often, it's not in charge. I feel this feeling, I feel disappointment, but it doesn't mean every decision I'm going to make today is going to be made from that place of disappointment.
Right. Yes.
I'm going to allow it to be here, and I'm going to carry on my workday. I'm going to be cordial, make decisions. I'm not going to overeat. I'm not going to flip people off when I'm driving.
Yeah. It's funny to me how we feel like, how often we allow or think that our emotions are going to drive the bus.
Mm-hmm. Well,
I woke up on the wrong side of the bed today, so this day's shot.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't have to be.
Right. That's that brooding, right?
Yeah.
Brooding. Like, oh, well, it always rains. I'm just gonna be mad all day.
And you know what? If that's the way you choose to face it, then you have that option available. But you also have the option to say, oh, well, this is just going to be one of those days, and I'm going to acknowledge it. This is my emotion. But that doesn't mean it has to direct my day.
Right.
I mean, we can work with that.
Mm-hmm. And
we're adults who make decisions every day.
I want to come back to that emotionally. Are you emotionally gaslighting yourself? Because I think I've been kind of schooled on this, and I couldn't understand it. And it comes up often in different areas of the coaching that I do, where people will say, well, they're gaslighting me. And I think I think it's overused.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And two, when we take full ownership of how we feel. And so if you're going to use this word, ask yourself, where are you emotionally gaslighting yourself, denying yourself, and compartmentalizing, sending yourself to your own room, or saying, don't come to me crying, and, those type of phrases to yourself.
Yes.
That to me was probably, along with the dead people's goals, and one of the more enlightening thoughts, where could I be emotionally gaslighting myself?
Yeah.
And other people doing it to me.
Yeah. Viktor Frankl, we've talked about this before. He talks about the main choice that we have that makes us human is we have the stimulus and we have the response, but we get to choose that space in between. The stimulus may be it's raining, or I lost my job, or my spouse is angry, or I am angry. I notice I am feeling angry. That's the stimulus, but we get to decide, am I going to turn around and walk out of the room and ignore my spouse? Am I going to flip somebody the bird because they cut me off in traffic? We get to decide where we're going to go with that response. And it's important to put space in between the emotion and the action. Yeah.
Agreed.
And we get to do that, folks. That's why we're adults.
Yeah.
That's what makes us adults. I mean, kids, that's what they haven't built out in their brains yet. That part of their brains that it hasn't developed. And we as parents are trying to mold that and help them to understand that you don't hit somebody just because they lost your toy or they did something, to spark something. You don't react. It's the same thing with us. That's as we become adults, we get to say, I need some space here. I don't just I don't just go and shoot somebody because they cut me off in traffic or because they made me angry at work.
I don't know what made me think of this, but, I appreciate the opportunity to think my thoughts out loud, right? Thinking of, this person who their inability, like their automatic response is to go shoot, and thinking of owning, that decision of, going to go overeat because we're avoiding our feelings.
Yes.
Like there's, in some ways, comparing completely different things, but from an understanding of the inability to process emotions. This was the best solution this person came up with, was to express himself or herself, whoever it was, by doing this act.
Yeah.
Then we turn on ourselves, because, and sometimes it's the best while we are hurting ourselves if we're overeating ultimately, and not really impacting others in this horrific way, but it's the best we can do sometimes.
Yeah.
So learning this skill for children, for adults, and always doing this work matters.
Yeah. Yeah. We put our children in a timeout to help them put space between the stimulus and the response. Sometimes we need to put us in a timeout too.
Yeah. The pause.
I mean, really, yeah,
right?
It's the power of the pause. Goes back to what we talked about a couple of weeks ago. But there's so much power in understanding that emotions don't drive the bus. They're not good or bad. They're just there. They're just like any other part of our body.
Compassion and curiosity. I mean, we get this from everyone that we follow. Who hasn't offered this as a solution? I mean, we talked about Tara Brach. We talked about Kristen Neff.
Yeah.
Susan David's talking about it. This ability to have some curiosity and compassion for emotion.
Yeah.
Just letting it be there.
It's where the magic is, folks. It's just so powerful, because like I said too, we can't ever be in integrity if we are pushing down, bottling up, denying. We have to have acceptance.
Or if we're gaslighting ourselves.
Yes. Yes.
That's it. And it's so interesting how when we are not in integrity with ourselves, how it shows up, that feeling, that knowing we have something's not right.
Yeah.
And how when we put pen to paper or process with a coach, a friend, how it comes by, you clearly identify when it's like the values-based decision, emotionally based, when we are not in integrity with ourselves.
Yeah, that's something else. I guess we need to start winding down, but that is one thing that she says, when we start digging down, I just completely lost my train of thought there. Never mind.
Does this align with my values? That's one way to check in, is to check in. Does this align with my values?
Yes. Thank you. That's where I was going. Does this align with my values? And why am I feeling disappointed? Is it because I think that there should be world peace? I mean, what is my value, and how is this feeling creating this rub that maybe I need to investigate? What does this say about my values, and how can I get to know myself better?
There you go. How can you get to know yourself better, Sonya?
Yeah.
Get a coach.
Get a coach, start doing this work. I mean, it really is life-changing, and there are no negative emotions.
That's right.
And that's what I want to leave folks with today, is to start, just at the very basic level, try to catch yourself putting your emotions in a binary. As if you catch yourself labeling an emotion as good or bad, just acknowledge that. That's where you start, at the beginning.
Yeah. And just say, oh, it's raining.
Uh-huh.
Oh, it
I'm
just sounds so
disappointed.
easy.
That's okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's
Just
raining.
disappointment feel in my body.
And it's a fact, right? Because your feelings are facts, not to be confused with
Yeah.
fact in the model or
Yes.
fact of the circumstance. I mean, but your feelings are factual to you.
Yes. Yes. They don't.
Stops are the signpost. She calls them the signpost to look. What is
Right.
this telling me?
Yes.
Mhm. Sorry,
Yeah,
I'm getting
that's
all fired up again. We do got to go.
No, it's interesting how we make it such a bigger issue than it even needs to be at the end of
Right.
the day.
Yeah.
It's an emotion, it's a data point, but it does not have to direct our actions. I can be sad, I can be disappointed, I can be angry, I can be all of those things, but I can still show up
Mhm.
as a person who takes care of business, who honors my commitment to my family. You know, it doesn't have to direct our paths.
Mhm. All right.
All right. Well, we will see you again next week, folks. If you love this podcast as much as we do, then
Right, that we want you to get into action on that. If you love
we
this
do.
podcast,
We do.
then-
We want you to give us a review or we'd like you to do both, really. We'd love for you to share an episode with a friend who's not listening to us,
Mhm.
because that also gets us out into the world.
And tag us.
Yes.
Who would that would just might
I would love that.
That would feel really amazing.
Yeah.
I would have really great thoughts.
I am noticing I am feeling gratitude for that review.
We
But
created
seriously,
value and dropped it out into the world, and it was well received, so much so that someone valued it enough to share it.
yeah. If you find this useful, we would love for you to pass it on, and we would love for you to let us know, because it helps us know, also knowing which episodes really touch you helps us to develop where we go and how we decide. So give us a review, share, tag us. The Coach's Cup podcast, you can tag us, you can tag one of us individually, but let's build this community. And
yeah. We've got plans.
And in the meantime, if you're looking for a coach, you can find me at sonyagreencoaching.com.
Oh, and you can find me last week's podcast, Google Corinne Crabtree, No BS weight loss program. Yeah. You will find me within the program on the Getting Coached little hamburger link. That's how you would get me.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll see you next week.
Bye, y'all.